Hello, I'm Steve Lentini, and I'm your host for the podcast Different Thinking for Different Times, Season 5, Episode 6. Christ once told his disciples, "Don't pull out the weeds as you might pull out the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest." And Richard Rohr, in his book Falling Upward, talks about as we awaken, we move from the lesser thinking, which is he typically attributes to the early life until maybe we're 35 or 40. And he says, as we awaken, we move from the lesser thinking and life to the greater thinking and living. And he attributes the greater thinking to people finally embracing where they've fallen instead of making themselves wrong for whatever mistakes they've had, living with regret or pain of the mistake. And different thinking for different times takes into account that that's why we're here. And I can tell you that when on November 18th, 2002, I left this existence from intensive care, 1 second, the next second I was one with everything and nothing, one with the infinite. And I can tell you that none of this crazy thinking that I call the acorn brain goes with us. So if you think like God thinks, then you would be limitless thinking. And the only thing I experienced was that nothing small-minded is in what's next, in heaven or in the infinite. I didn't experience like a place like heaven. It was a consciousness immediately. Words cannot describe it. I do the best I can, but it was immense light, immense love, immense grace, but nothing like we can comprehend with what I now call the acorn brain, that small-minded thinker that resides in all of us. When Einstein was asked, what did he think about God? He answered in two ways. As I've said previously on these podcasts, he answered, the superior reasoning power that formed this incomprehensible universe is my idea of God. And other times he would say, well, read the God of Spinoza, suggesting that that's what formed his idea of God. Spinoza says things like, stop blaming me for your miserable life. He's saying God would say these things. I never told you there was anything wrong with you or that you were a sinner or that your sexuality was a bad thing. Sex is a gift I have given you with which you can express your love, your ecstasy, and your joy. So stop blaming me. Don't blame me for everything they made you believe, meaning other humans, right? Because judgment is that small-minded thinking that humans have. And we have the hubris to think we think like God. We are so far off. Spinoza goes on to say, stop reading alleged sacred scriptures that have nothing to do with me. If you can't read me in a sunrise, in a landscape, in the look of your friends, in your son's eyes, you will find me in no book. And when you read all of the Holy Scriptures, by the way, I believe the truth is in all the books. But when it becomes small-minded, when you read something about vengeance or revenge, that's where the human took over. That's where the small-minded thinker was probably angry at someone. And again, back in the early times, people thought they did think like God. That little voice in their head that Rainer Maria Rilke calls the little hooligan, they believed it. I'm urging all my listeners to expand and stretch their thinking into limitless, infinite thinking, become more godlike, and stop judging others who fall. Their journey is none of your business. Your journey is none of anybody else's business. Your journey is your business, and you're here to experience life, and you're gonna fall. Richard Rohr says those who think they're perfect, that's their challenge to get over in life. That's the place where they're falling. He talks about clergy who have never experienced life, preaching to others, and or hiding their mistakes and sins like so many in the Catholic Church. But it isn't just the Catholic Church. The First Testament talks about many stories in the Torah of people's failings. And they use that as an example of things not to do. But has humanity learned from the thousands of years of reading that? No. And I suspect it'll all continue for many thousands of years. Because each new generation that's born has to learn again, and they learn by falling. And we have to come to embrace that. And we can see so many examples today of small-minded thinking. We see it in our politics. We see it from Hollywood actors and professional athletes, the news media, the place where what we're doing is making others wrong so we can be right, wanting to be right instead of doing the right thing. We seem intent on having just a monologue. My side is right. No, your side is wrong. My side is right. Instead of having the art of a dialogue, which is a dialogue, the definition of a dialogue is a jointly created reality. And we waste so much time railing against others. We even do it now in social media. People carry their phones around when they're answering things on Facebook or Twitter, and they're railing against people who make one statement or the other. Who cares? Who cares? Even our leaders are modeling poor behavior, pointing the finger at each other, making each one side wrong or the other. And then they're expecting the general populace to act differently. And it's our fault. If we're part of an electorate, it's our responsibility to elect responsible people who are willing to have a dialogue. And perhaps maybe shouldn't get into politics until they're 40 and they've had jobs. And then maybe a term limit. And then for other groups of people, whether it's the media or actors or professional athletes or newscasters or commentators, to point fingers and suggest how anyone should live is crazy in this country anyway. We have a democracy. Now, if you want to move to China or move to Venezuela or move to Iran, move to countries or North Korea where if you agree with them, then you will be fine. You'll feel happy because you're living in a controlled society. We can manage ourselves. We can manage the differences in this country. But I suggest in all around the world, people need to begin thinking in much broader fashion and to work to eliminate in their home, first of all, small-minded thinking, where they hold a grudge against a brother or a story about their mother or a story about their father. It's to eliminate that small-minded thinking and let it begin with me. I still have the acorn brain. I'm reminded of small-minded thinking every day. But I'm grateful that I had that experience over 20 years ago because I saw the folly of living my life from the outside in gaining validation from homes I owned or material possessions or the clothes I wore or the job titles I had or the books I've written. None of that means anything. Today, I work living from the inside out. If I want to be happy, I choose to be happy. And no matter what occurs, because it's all from the creator of the universe. Think about it. Whatever made the universe, do you think if it took its attention off the universe, if it was not always part of us, and we, by the way, part of it, we're living in the universe. That means for me, everything that shows up is meant for me, as Muhammad said. What reaches you is meant for you. What misses wasn't. I'm paraphrasing, but you can read it in my book, Sage Advice, Wisdom for Living from Throughout the Ages. It's available on Amazon in case you didn't know. Go to Amazon, type in Steve Lentini, books by Steve Lentini, Lentini. So I can tell you that the divine is never separate from us. What I learned when I left my body in the Waltham Hospital from intensive care on the 5th day of being in intensive care was there was only the now. There was no past. There was no future. And I could not tie the events of the infinite, my experience of the infinite, together until I was back in my body. So if the divine was in the now when I was one with the infinite, that I had my consciousness, not a body, I had my consciousness, then the divine is with me now in every moment. It's up to me, though. I have to awaken, which I talk about in my book, Wake Up, Jump Into Your Life, also available on Amazon. We have to awaken to embrace life as it is. I'm writing about that experience and in many stories in my new book, In Plain Sight. Learn to see what most people miss and embrace life as it is, that it's all divine. Yes, we have tragedies. We have things that happen to us. And then it's how we respond. But there are many other things we can influence by making different choices in the moment, by not being a reaction. The automatic thought that leads to an automatic response is typically not healthy. If we're more proactive with our choices, beginning, as I suggest, when you rise in the morning, you can choose to be joyful and happy and grateful no matter what occurs. And then to think for a moment, whatever you believe, the Buddha has said similar things. It's very similar in the Hindu, the Jewish faith, the Christian faith. Christ said, everything works together for good. Muhammad said, what reaches you is meant for you. So I reflect on all the thoughts of the sages from the past that left us invaluable advice, wonderful advice for living in the moment. As Eckhart Tolle says, when you fight life, life fights you. So I stopped fighting life back in 2002. And I'm embarrassed to say I was 50, so I didn't learn it until then. But if you learn it now, whatever age you're at, whether you're 80 or 90 or 20 or 50, the minute you learn to embrace life as it is and to know it's sent to you by the divine, by the creator of the universe. Now, some people have suggested, I think it's Matthew Nichols who wrote about the journey of souls. He was hypnotizing people and finding out what their experience was of heaven. And there's been the suggestion, if you read his book, from many people that were his patients or subjects of the test or the trial, that it was all prearranged. And that we come back many, many times. Now, I don't know if that's true. I wasn't given the time to see behind the total curtain. But I can tell you in my life review, the only thing mentioned was the good I had done. And that I ask people today, how do they feel when they do good? And most say they feel great when they do good. There's a reason for it. We're here to do good. We're here to do the right thing and to enjoy our life and to appreciate, not tolerate, to appreciate all the wonderful differences that the Creator provided, both in our race, the human race, and all the different facets of living on this earth, this amazing miracle that's tinier than a marble in relation to the size of the universe, floating around an exposed nuclear fusion plant that we call the sun, with a rock that's floating around us that affects our tides called the moon. And we take this for granted. And the suffering that we make, as Spinoza said, we can choose to make this heaven or hell. And that's what most people do. For most of my life, it was a blend of both. And now I'm grateful to be alive, to have a second chance at life. The last 20 plus years since that day in 2002 have been the World Series of life for me. It can be for you. It has to be that choice. Don't take my word for it, though. Change your thinking. Test it for yourself. You prove it to yourself. You become the scientist, and the experiment is your life. See if when you change, things change. See if limitless, universal, infinite thinking will change your life as opposed to the small-minded thinking when you want to rail against someone, when you want to protest. It's fine to disagree, but have a dialogue with the people you disagree with. Understand their position. Encourage them to understand yours, and see if there's a place where you can compromise. And perhaps the solution is there in the middle somewhere. Any questions? If you'd like to be a guest, email me, Steve@SteveLentini, Lent as in Tom, INI.com. That's Steve@SteveLentini.com. Come on to have a dialogue with me, disagree with me, challenge me. Remember, I might just ask you, does that sound like small-minded thinking? Thanks.